With your help, we can continue to fight for freedom, reach new audiences, and bring important information to the public free of charge. This is not possible without your generosity. Join our quest for the truth and our freedom and donate today, telling it as it is. This is today's News Talk, The World Today.
Sorry about the late start. A couple of things going on. Can't help bad luck. It's a Friday on the Gold Coast. It's 21 past 4, which is all of Queensland, but it's pelting down here. A very heavy rain band has been going since last night. I had a slip outside. I looked like I was surfing down the main stretch. By the way, in New South Wales and Victoria, it's 20 past 5. In London, it's 20 past, almost 22 past 6 in the morning. But the good thing is, the magnificent thing is, it's Friday. And I don't know if it's just me, as I'm getting a little bit older, not much denial set in, but Fridays or weekends are looking more important to me. I have to ask Gary about that. Does he look forward to weekends like I do too? And then I end up coming back into work. But yeah, it's all in the mind, isn't it? Now, this week the Prime Minister delivered the Closing the Gap report. In its 18th year, the annual progress report is a commitment made since 2008, when the then Prime Minister Kevin Rudd pledged to reduce the disparities between Indigenous and non-Indigenous Australians within a generation. The 2025 report highlighted that while some areas are improving, only 4 of 19 key targets are currently on track. Is this, think about it, is this an absolute failure, despite annual spending, wait for it, of more than $30 billion on First Nations people? The Hon Dr Gary Johns was member of the Australian House of Representatives from 1987 to 1996, holding the Queensland seat of Petrie for the Australian Labor Party. That's when they were good. I even voted for the ALP in those days. Don't tell my dad, he'll fall over. Actually, he did fall over. And a lovely funeral too. Gary served as Special Minister of State and Assistant Industrial Relations Minister. He's also served on the Productivity Commission, and from 2017 to 2022 was head of the Australian Charities and Not-for-Profits Commission. He's an author of numerous papers and books and publications. His latest book is The Burden of Culture. In 2023, Gary was chairman of Recognise a Better Way, a group arguing the no case regarding the Albanese government's proposal for an Indigenous Voice to Parliament. He then formed the research organisation Close the Gap Research, of which he is chairman. First of all, I have to introduce, he's no longer the honorary, he's the Honourable Dr Gary Johns, as he reminded me. Did I get it right?
You did indeed, Mike. Thank you, and my apologies for being late, but Brisbane is just locked up at the moment. We've got a major problem out there.
Well, we need more roads and better roads. And when I see the ads on YouTube and TV popping up that we're doing these things for you, the roads are still terrible. And I suppose as you bring in more people and increase the population of various vicinities around Queensland, if you haven't got the roads for it, you're going to have a bottleneck. But just think, if you were driving to the Goldie or Gold Coast, or if you were on the Gold Coast driving to Brisbane on the M1, I'd have to see you for breakfast. It's terrible. The Closing the Gap framework, it's an admirable mission, but the question is it working?
No, and more importantly, it can't. The framework is pathetic. We're really saying because there's a disparity between some Aboriginal people and all other Australians, all we have to do is give those poorer Aborigines money or run government programs and all will be well. And now after 18 years, we find that it's not well and it will never be well because we refuse to acknowledge that two things are happening. That collective Aboriginal self-determination only advantages the people at the top. That is, the PhDs and the pro vice chancellors and the academics and all the rest of it. But it cruels the chances of the people at the bottom. That is, those Aboriginal people who are sitting mainly in rural and remote areas. And this is the second element. They are the least able. They have been locked out of the modern economy. They're not attending school. They barely read, write, and speak English. So as the Prime Minister gets up each year, they're actually condemning about 20% of Aboriginal people. They are the policy settings in this area are a disgrace. I think some politicians understand it. I think some policy makers understand it, but they are willfully continuing on this charade that is locking about 20% of Aboriginal people out of the economy and the modern world. The consequences are dire. Children dying young, women being bashed, men and women going to jail early. Mike, it's almost a mystery to me. I've been at this for 30 years. Why the hell they keep making these speeches and continuing on this pathway of self-determination? I don't know. It's a cruel thing.
Yeah, I'm from an area called it's Mildura in Victoria, and when I grew up, we had small Aboriginal settlements, and I have to tell you, they were treated appallingly, given a lot of money, and it was terrible. And what I learned, and my wife actually took an interest. She's from a place called Shepparton, so same sort of thing, and the ignorance that she conveyed to me from the population and from government, and she said they were just basically plain ignorant. I mean, they all wanted to seem to do good, but the amount of money they were spending and stuff was just a complete waste of time. Even then, without being nasty, they burned their houses down, and they didn't want to go the direction that which we found us white folk wanted them to go. Can you tell me, because I see all these do-gooders and, the government wanting to do good, and I see state governments, didn't give a rat's about the voice and stuff like that. I see everything just moving along the way that a group of people, such as government of those, are telling the Indigenous people what to do. Tell me if I'm wrong, but I can't see a whole lot of difference except the amount of money and a few platitudes. I can't see a whole lot of difference between now and what happened, when I grew up. And I think, to me, I think that the virtuous signalling from government or from these white folk, I think is part of the problem, and I don't know how to fix it. But forever and a day, government has always been giving money to the Indigenous people, and you're right. The role of self-determination. I mean, in Hawaii, when I lived there, they were going to give there was this. Yes, we'll give the island, and they couldn't wait for it. Give it back to the Indigenous Hawaiians. It never went anywhere, and so how do we fix it? I mean, having lived in an area that was very prominent. I mean, it was just terrible around Dareton and stuff like that, which is in New South Wales, but close to Mildura. It was just appalling what they did, and the poor buggers. They'd be drunk in streets and stuff. It's not how we should. I mean, we were doing it wrong then, and I still think we're doing it wrong now.
Yeah. All right. I think we have to acknowledge that in the Milduras and Sheppartons, but in more remote or in the remote areas, we have a collapsed society. All right. About half of Aboriginal children born in the north are not only outside wedlock, even informally, if you like, father unknown. Right? There's just a collapse in society. 20% of Aboriginal men have gone to jail. In the north, fewer than 10% of kids attend school often enough to pass. It's called an attendance level. So they're not going to school. Girls are getting pregnant young. Men and now more women are getting into sufficient trouble with the law to have to be jailed, and they have to be jailed because most of the crimes are violent crimes. So let's accept that we have a collapsed society. But it's not true for 80% of Aboriginal people who have escaped that society. They are into the modern, open society. They're going to school, colleges, universities, and they're getting lots of jobs. Unfortunately, too many getting jobs in the public service, in designated positions, meaning that only Aborigines and Torres Strait Islanders can apply. So it's not particularly efficient, but at least they're paying taxes and getting on with life. But the mindset has changed since about 1967, and that mindset was such that we gave up on the notion that you had to come in. You had to adapt to the new world. It wasn't a white man's world, it was a modern world. So once that assumption was swept aside and we began this game of self-determination, we asked people who with no skills or very few skills adaptable to the modern world to build a new Jerusalem. You had to stay out there on collective title with few skills, very little English, less than your grandparents, and make a go of it. And that's been the message throughout what we call the settler states, the US, Canada, Australia, New Zealand, who were wealthy enough and insightful enough to recognise there were Aboriginal peoples and we wanted to care for them. But this awful ideology of self-determination started to seep through, mainly from the communists in the 1960s. That captured the heights of policy making, and a lot of Aboriginal people are doing well today because they escaped that thinking. They were free of that thinking. Their kids came through under the explicit policy of integration. So all of the sort of great Aboriginal, part Aboriginal thinkers today were the product of integration, and they've turned it back and said, well, our people need self-determination, and that's why we can't get the last 20% in.
So how do we do it? How do we do it? I mean, we're spending more than 30 billion.
Okay, let me go straight to that. What's happened is that about 50-60% of Australia is under native title. And in years to come, the battle won't be over winning native title, it'll be over compensation for impinging on native title. So I'm saying to whoever will listen, when those monies go from state governments to native title holders, as much as possible should be tied up into trust for the education of the children. The only way out of this is to get as many kids into boarding school and off those properties and away from that foul culture as we can. They will go in too late. They'll go in as early teens or whatever, but you can't take children as young ones. That's too much. But we have to change the conversation to say you literally have to live a regular life. You have to be trained for 10 years like everyone else in order to cope in this society. So it's a long-term plan. There is a stream of money that we're going through to native title holders, which is in the areas that you need, which is in remote areas. That's the solution, Mike. And there are a lot of good people who run boarding schools and smaller schools attached to remote communities who are dedicated. They're pretty much like the old Christian missionaries, and often they are, who are prepared to spend years to take children from these awful communities and train them, stick with them long enough so they get a chance to come in just as their grandparents did 2 generations ago.
Tell me about your organisation, Close the Gap Research.
Yeah, well, we're a small band of people scattered around Australia who are prepared to put in some basic research like For instance, there are a lot of organisations that look after Aboriginal people who come out of jail, for instance, and we say which ones are doing the best in terms of reducing recidivism, that is, the propensity to return to jail. And we find that governments don't even ask. The government will ask of a bloke who's come out of jail and goes through a 3-month course, did you enjoy the course? Well, of course he did. He's out of jail and he's getting 3 meals a day and playing touch footy. The question is, what are the chances of that person returning to jail? Governments won't ask. So we're just saying, can you only fund things that work? And in this case, is a nice simple test of what works. How long did you stay out of jail? And so we write, I'd call it very simple papers. We wrote a survey of schools that provide scholarships for Aboriginal kids. And we say, do you know it's an Aboriginal kid? Did the kid win it on merit, on the basis of need? Do you know whether they got through school? And the survey results were very disappointing. Schools often don't ask. They just want someone who identifies as an Aboriginal kid and is probably very distantly related to get a scholarship, so they have a little icon at school to say, look, we've got our Aboriginal kid. But it didn't close the gap. The kid was going to pass anyway. So we always keep that focus on need, not race. The only thing that will close the gap is you focus on someone in need and your intervention is of the type that might help them come in.
Do you ever have conversations with the current Labor, any government? You make a lot of sense. Surely, and the reason I'm saying that is if they spent more than 30 billion, I would imagine it was the same, or a lot of other years or close to it, if not more. And it just seems perhaps they could just walk out into a strong wind and throw that into the air. It would probably do just as good. Do you ever talk to them and say, look, fellas, you're not doing it properly?
Yes, I've been talking to the new government in Queensland for some time about this. I think initially they were receptive, but they're finding it too hard. See, what happens is that you'll talk to a minister and they'll say, yes, that's we understand, Gary. And then they'll talk to public servants. And the public servants at the most senior level are too scared to overcome that middle level Aboriginal public servant who basically says, look, leave it alone. We own this. You don't understand it. We have cultural insights, whatever that means. And by the way, if you tell us what to think, we'll claim that we feel culturally unsafe. There's this appalling game going on whereby those who got their university degree, got into public service positions, designated positions, own it, and they do not like the likes of me and my Aboriginal colleagues telling them that they're getting it very, very wrong. So, Mike, we're in there, we're trying. I can't even open a door to a Labor government, but, So I'm going to keep working on the Queensland government and I'll try to get to the Northern Territory government. I think they know they're wrong. I think they know what they're doing is harmful. But sometimes it just takes a lot of conversations for people to recognise and to change their views.
I wonder if when they scratch their head, if they get splinters. Truly. We have a few sayings in the bush, and I'm not going to do that because it's a family show. But jeepers, mate. Anyway, look, it was a pleasure chatting with you, Gary, again. Thank you for turning up, and I appreciate your time. They have flying cars coming out shortly, so you'll be fine after they get here. Can you imagine, though, how dangerous that will be?
Yeah. There are losers in every revolution, Mike.
It'll be no longer an airbag, it'll be a parachute. Gary, thank you so much for your time. Have a great weekend too, and we'll talk again soon. This is The World Today. Coming up next, Tony Nikolic.
We're today's news talk, The World Today.
And welcome back to The World Today. You can tell it's a Friday. Already I need a scotch. Actually, I always need a scotch, so forget that. Charlotte, don't even send me that email again. You will see it where the sun, or you won't see it because we where the sun don't shine about drinking scotch. Now, in Australia, I'll talk to Tony about that. We should get him onto you. In Australia, family law operates on the principle of the best interest of the child, not parental gender, ensuring children have a right to a meaningful relationship with both parents. Historical bias, as my voice breaks against fathers, is often cited. Key issues for men include navigating custody, residence, ensuring enforcement of access, managing child support, and addressing concerns regarding potential biases in family violence allegations. Tony Nikolic is the General Manager at AFL Solicitors, an experienced lawyer and criminologist committed to social justice. He offers pro bono legal work and champions civil and human rights. Tony has expertise in whistleblower protections, which as we progress down the track, you can bet your bottom dollar that we're going to need Tony Nikolic to protect us from releasing sensitive information, aka the truth. Tony, thanks for joining us.
Hey, thanks for having me again, Mike.
I left out that part where you said you're the best in Australia, so I thought you could do that yourself.
Yeah, I thought maybe when I have a few scotches, mate, that might get a bit
You shouting, I'll be there. Not hear that.
single malt, only single malt, Mike.
That's okay. It's okay. I don't care about the price. Sorry, we have to be serious here because it's a very serious problem. Men's rights and family law. Now, I don't know a whole lot about it, except what you read in the papers and you see on TV and stuff like that. How serious is it? How infringed are blokes?
Well, the family law, the objectives, Mike, I've got a master's in family law dispute resolution as well, and I practice in family law quite well, one of the major areas. But the whole idea of family law is obviously to be fair and equitable across the whole spectrum, meaning gender neutral. Unfortunately, in practice, and I don't say this, putting blame anywhere, but there's certainly something going on because men are obviously getting the short end of the stick. Now, in saying that, I just want to make it very clear. I've represented both males and females, and it depends who gets custody, but the overwhelming, and I say overwhelming majority, is the mothers get custody. They get significant amounts of money, and child support affects the father. And in many instances, the preconditions for that to occur are quite dubious, and that is where we are right now.
Is that because and I'll tell you why I'm mentioning this, is that because the perception is that guys are big, burly and wife beaters, but I'll tell you the anomaly I saw, actually was in the one of the local newspapers here on the Gold Coast, which we have our daily newspaper, comes out once a year. No, but it had these terrible domestic violence people, and there were 4 images, and there was a guy and a guy and a guy and a female. And I thought, oh, hello, that's a bit interesting. She must be giving the husband maybe a bit of a biff behind the ear and a few others. But I'm just thinking though, out of those 4 people that were the terrible domestic violent people, is there a percentage of women that are that have DVs against them? And would that go against the grain of which again, I'm just guessing here, but what I read and see, would that be going against the grain that courts think that the guy, first of all, is the beater and that the wife is the one receiving it?
Look, it's a great question. Predominantly, it's dominated by males. The domestic violence charges and restraining orders. And remember, when you get a restraining order or an apprehended domestic violence order, it depends on how they're terming it and what state you're in. The fact that you have it doesn't mean you've actually perpetuated one, because you can say, well, I'm going to consent to the restraining order or the domestic violence order, but I'm going to make no admissions. But therein lies the statistical trap, Michael. So when you start seeing statistics, these overwhelming graphs demonstrate that males are well and truly dominating. That doesn't mean that they did, because many males, and I know this from my criminal practice, and as many other criminal lawyers will also tell you, they do it just to get rid of it because of the stress. So they say, look, if there's no admissions, I'm not going to get charged. I'll the option is either fight it, or I can just take this, leave it, and we're not going to argue. I'm not going to spend tens of thousands of dollars defending something. So you can do what they call by consent without admission, but then statistically that can get used down the track when you start seeing media, bureaucracy, politicians talking about domestic violence statistics. Technically, it comes out as saying, well, this person sought to resolve it, you see. So down the track, it gives you a misconception of what's really occurring on the ground. In my practice, I know a lot of them, we actually win a lot of those cases, because by the time evidence is tested, you'll end up finding out that a lot of what was said in there is either embellished or made up. And that's not saying that they all are. I just want that to be very clear, because some are very serious and they should all be treated very seriously. I just want to make that very clear. But by the same token, the statistical analysis, so when you look at it from a criminological point, the statistics will show something very different. So, for instance, 26% of domestic violence assault matters were withdrawn, okay, here in New South Wales, from the New South Wales Bureau of Crime Statistics. 8% resulted in absolutely no proven charges whatsoever. So that tells you exactly what I'm saying is the case. So when that then is transferred into the family jurisdiction, well, that then turns into a whole new ballgame, because the family law jurisdiction is significantly lower threshold, in the sense that all the way through until you actually get to your hearing, which could be 2.5, 3 years down the track, is presuming that something may have occurred. Doesn't mean it did. The allegation's totally different. So, and in that time, the father is potentially not seeing the kids or having to see them under contact. So it's a very significant issue we need to address.
What are the main issues for guys, for men, blokes say, in these situations? I mean, and again, I probably going back to my original thoughts, is that there would be a fair amount of bias involved.
There is, and that is where it's at. So basically, we call it the silver bullet. All you have to do is one party. Usually, it's unfortunately it is the the female side alleges domestic violence against the male, and it then turns into a long, arduous journey for a male to prove that he's worthy enough to be a father. Now, I can give you one example. There was a case, and this is a real case, I won't identify it, but the week prior, they had been actually in Surfers Paradise, I believe, somewhere around there, and they had been on a beautiful family trip. You can imagine the photos that were coming from that family trip, and, kids jumping on dad, and, mum and dad hugging, all the good stuff. And what ended up happening after that, I think it was the next week, the father works out that the wife had been having an affair with someone, and he approaches her, not in a bad way, just says, hey, can you tell me, is this true? And ends up that was the case. But the most important issue about that is she then went and filed in the family courts, and at the same time went and filed for an apprehended domestic violence order. That took about 8-9 months for the investigation. We represented him in that, and that didn't go anywhere, didn't even make it to court. In that time, the family law proceedings were running in parallel, so he still hasn't seen his children because he's deemed to be a danger. And straight after that was dropped, a sexual allegation against the children was made. And that went on for many more months again. In this time, he cannot see his children because now we have federal agencies investigating this father. Now, I can tell you this father is a loving father, never did anything wrong. in the sense of, significant violence or anything like that. Perhaps yelling at the child for, or setting a boundary may have been about the worst he got. And I don't know if any other parent in Australia hasn't done that, but anyway. But the issue was that by now it's almost 2 years, 2.5 years. He hasn't seen his kids because of the prohibitions that are in there. Were there any implications on the mother for doing so? No. And that is the issue. Now, this father is having to remediate. So they're some of the crux issues. The other issues, Mike, are significant, is when that does occur, men have no services. You don't have. Tell me, have you ever heard of a men's refuge? Have you heard of a men's, a bunkhouse where they can go to? They're just not there. So we're working on these in the background, Mike. Myself with a couple other people as to how and what support services. And I touch on that from a real case that I had here. Very similar circumstances where the allegation was of this different case altogether. And he had nowhere to go. And I rang him a week later and I said, oh, look, I need you to come in and we just got to sign some documents. And have you got access to your computer? He goes, Tony, I've been living in my car for the last week and I've got nowhere else to go. I've got nowhere to sleep. I've got no family here. So that's the reality of what's happening out there, Mike. And men have been dumped. So we have all these different institutions and bodies. And I'm not saying take them away from the women because they're also needed. And if you hear what I'm saying, it's more of a gender neutral thing, but you can't be gender neutral if one party's the only one getting all the referrals and the support. Men need the support.
What about both cases? I mean, the guy living in the car and the other fellow that had first the DV and keep away, then the sexual investigation on him with his kiddies. What about their mental health? I mean, to sleep in a car for a week would mean that your mental health is taking a real battering.
It is, Mike. The misconception here is because you're a man, you're tough, you can slog it out. Well, how do you do that? You don't have a kitchen, you don't have a toilet, you don't have a bathroom, you don't have your wife, you don't have your kids. Life as you knew it is no longer there. You now lose employment. And they go to the brink of suicide. The suicide rates for males are astronomical. No one's paying attention to it. And when you do pay attention, they say, well, it's patriarchy and you deserve it because, you guys have dominated. Well, that's not the case. And I know so many women out there, loving, caring mothers and women who are actually saying it's wrong. It's wrong when a woman makes up allegations. And there are cases of false allegations. I can tell you, I've had a case where messages were left on a telephone saying to the husband, that's the wife to the husband, saying, if you don't effing come home now, I'm going to drive these kids into an effing river and you're never going to see them again. Well, let me tell you something. The court's seen that as an emotional response to someone who's taking care of the kids, and that wasn't one message. There was months and many months of those sorts of messages coming out. And so really there was a lot of fear for these young children. Well, in some cases, the courts actually gave them custody at certain points or parental responsibility, and the father fought and got him back. But that's the difference. A guy doesn't even have to do that. A guy can, under hearsay, the wife can say, well, he said this to me with no evidence, and he won't see them and potentially never see them again. That is the difference. And this is what drives dads to the brink of absolute despair, because they're with their kids. They love, they nurture their kids. They get them ready for school. And in one day that's all torn away. They don't even have a home anymore. They've got to live out of the back of a car. Their mental health goes deteriorating. And you know what happens then? They go to the court and the court says, see, he can't look after himself.
That is just, it's actually heartbreaking, very sad, isn't it? We've got probably 2 minutes left. Is there any organisation that will help these guys, these males, men going through this garbage? And besides yourself, are there other legal options for I mean, if someone's, I mean, I know that you do a pro bono and stuff and all that, and you're going to go to heaven because you're the number one lawyer in Australia, according to
Single
yourself.
malt. Yes.
Single malt, that's right. It's a great heaven. I'm going to go with you. But I'm just thinking, though, there has to be other. What about government services to help the guys, or is it like the government via the police? And I know this for a fact that via the police, they're going to side with the woman first up.
Absolutely.
Yeah,
Absolutely.
so it puts the guys on the back foot. Just quickly, is there any other organisation, government or whatever, that someone could go to instead of sleeping in a car? And I understand that the mental health is really taking a battering, but are there options available to them? I know they're few and far between, but there has to be some good organisations. I mean, even your local church.
Well, you can, but again, it's they're desperation points because under Australia's economy right now, the Pacific peso, you've also got a lot of the elderly, a lot of the mental health going into the churches, people who can't afford food. So the burden of social services is being spread. But to put very generally in your question, the basic issue is no, we don't even have a minister for men. We have no accommodations for men. There are groups out there, and we are in the process of developing. There's some really good podcasters out there. We've got Jared Purcell, Broken Fathers podcast. We've got Parent Beyond Breakup, and we are now in the process of setting up further issues, obviously through myself and others. We're going to get together and get this going. The issue with respect to men is very serious. It's not heard, it's silent, and it is a revolution against fatherhood, and it needs to change because strong families need strong fathers.
I need to talk to you off air the next week or so because we have some. We're making progress into restarting TNT again, but not as TNT, but very similar. So you mentioned some great names, and I think we're going to do things a bit differently, and we will invite these people on to have their own shows because I think it's very important. I think mental health and to feel like that you're needed and that people respect you and love you and that your life has not stopped because of terrible things happening to you. I think we need to be able to get that word out too. Tony, somebody.
Can I just say, and I do apologise. That is certainly the very, very poignant point that you made there. In the middle of this are the children, and we keep forgetting that when you tear a father away, that child hurts, and it hurts for a long and potentially for a very, very long time. And they keep saying in the best interest of the child. Well, separating a family and cleaving the father out of that family and telling that son or that daughter you can never see your dad again, that's not in the best. There might be the serious point. We take that for it, but not every dad. Unfortunately, most dads are being treated like this.
Yeah, it's absolutely terrible. Look, it was great chatting with you as I'm trying to get my news organised. The guy is waving his arms at me, but he'll be on in a second. Tony Nicholing, Australia and the world's greatest lawyer. Somebody wants to find out more about you. I owe me 4 bottles. Wants to find out more about you. How do they do that?
It's aflsolicitors.com.au or admin, ADMIN, at aflsolicitors.com.au. Pop us an email, give us a call. Everything's there. You see what we do. We're happy to help out. Thank you, Mike.
You will go to heaven way before, not way before me. I won't get there.
No.
I mean, unless you want to go before
a little bit longer.
I have to make a few detours, I'm sure, where there are rocks. Tony Nicholing, thank you so much for your time. This is The World Today.
With your help, we can continue to fight for freedom, reach new audiences, and bring important information to the public free of charge. This is not possible without your generosity. Join our quest for the truth and our freedom and donate today, telling it as it is. This is today's News Talk, The World Today.
Welcome back to The World Today. That was an experience and a half, but I appreciate Andrew, Ross and Paul for joining in on the discussion, which is very serious because, oh, beauty, we're going to build this brand new, big building, computers, the whole lot. How do we make it work? So just wait and see what happens. It's going to be an exciting year. Now, approved by the Israeli cabinet last week in its final draft, when this bill is passed by the Knesset, Israel will have the authority to impose Israeli law in areas of the West Bank that have been under Palestinian control. Now, the bill will affect and involve dozens of Palestinian historical sites in the West Bank. In addition, Israelis will be able to purchase real estate in these areas, which I think is absolutely obscene, paving the way for future Israeli settlement in Palestinian demographic centres. The UN says it is gravely concerned, but we won't do anything over Israeli plans to expand control over the occupied West Bank. Saudi Arabia, Jordan, and a number of other regional states have also condemned Israel's move. It is unclear when the new rules will take effect, but they again show Israel can do what it likes, and international law simply is meaningless. Dr. Frank Romano is a member of the California and Marseille bars. He represents the Palestinian people before the ICC, is a peace and freedom activist, and has organised many demonstrations in Palestine, Israel, and the US against the Israeli occupation. He's the author of Love and Terror in the Middle East, and that's the 5th edition. Frank, thanks for joining us.
Pleasure, always a pleasure, Mike. Thanks for having me with you. This is such a very important issue that we need to discuss today.
Bring us up to speed. What are the facts? Where are we?
Yes, well, let me just start out with personal experience. I was jailed in 2018 in Israel, protesting the potential destruction of a Bedouin village near Jerusalem called Elkanah Akmar. The village was surrounded by settlements, settlers attacking Bedouins on a daily basis, even draining their sewage into the Bedouin village, which was typical a strategy of settlers. But just like the Bedouin village, Hebron was also under the control and subject to daily incursions, attacks, settlers. I lived there also for 2 months. And Palestinians, before I lived with the Bedouins, I lived next to the Ibrahim Mosque. The Palestinian mobility even then, and that was in 2018, mobility was even severely restricted then. Many settlers invaded dwellings and took them over, and soldiers required over 1,000 Palestinian shops to close because they were too close to the settlements. Many checkpoints controlled the mobility of Palestinians, and I could, witness that as I was very well restricted in my mobility. And now, as you noted, Mike, there is a plan adopted by the Knesset officially ushering in the legal purchase by Israeli Jews of property. An example, allowing them to take over Hebron almost completely, slowly but surely, and making life even more difficult than before. What are particular these measures? The Israeli government is making it easier then for Israelis to purchase and then seize the land, and attempting to change the laws concerning land registration, and that's key. So opening up land registration for the first time in the West Bank allows Israeli Jews to know who owns the land. In other words, they will know which Palestinians own the land so that they can pressure and harass them. Now, keep this in consideration, and I don't think it was alluded to yet, Mike, in your introduction, but President Donald Trump has previously voiced opposition to the annexation of occupied West Bank, and this looks like, and we'll talk about this more specifically, a prelude to complete annexation. Now, the world opposition, there have been a lot of opposition to these measures that you've already noted, Mike. I won't go into it, but let's look at the Oslo Accord of 1993. The Oslo Accord divided up the West Bank into 3 areas, Area A, B, and C. Area A controlled by Palestinians, for civil and security control. Area B is joint Israeli control. The Palestinians would still be in control of the civil and security control, and divided with Israelis. Area C, which is 60% of the West Bank, complete control by Israel. This decision that you announced, Mike, will institutionalize a system of municipal apartheid. It is key to Palestinian cities, removing them from the Palestinian Authority jurisdiction. Now let's look at Hebron specifically. Hebron is in Area B, right? Divided jurisdiction between Israel and the Palestinian Authority. The planning and construction powers have been stripped from the Palestinian municipality and transferred to the Israeli civil administration. It's a separate municipal entity created for Jewish settlers in the heart of the city to manage their affairs independently, bypassing all Palestinian mechanisms that was set up by Oslo. Then we have Rachel's tomb in Bethlehem. This site has been removed from the jurisdiction of the Bethlehem municipality and placed under direct Israeli administration for the maintenance of services. Now, Adel Shadid, an expert on Israeli affairs, has warned that these administrative changes have profound religious and political implications. What does this mean? The Ibrahim Mosque is no longer treated as a Muslim holy site managed by Palestinian Authority. It's management is transferred to a Jewish religious council in Kiryat Arba. Israel has effectively Judaized its identity by law, not by force. Oslo, then, which was already almost totally void before this decision, especially since Israel has refused to return huge chunks of land to Palestinians under Oslo, appears to now be completely gutted. Now, looking at Hebron again, the Abraham Mosque in Hebron is an important symbol for Palestinians, but it's also a site revered by Jews that refer to it as the tomb of the patriarchs. So Hebron is the largest Palestinian city in the West Bank, over 200,000 people, and about 800 settlers have taken over large areas of the downtown city, protected by the Israeli military. And when I was living there in 2018, there were only 400. So the number of settlers have doubled since then. Now, in addition, these new rules that you discussed, Mike, would also set forth that the authority over building permits for illegal Jewish settlements in Hebron and the Ibrahim Mosque would be transferred to the Israeli government from the Palestinian Hebron municipality. This is a way to completely control this religious site. It's also added to increased restrictions to worshippers, settler incursions into Palestinian homes and districts, control over the entry and exit through a myriad of checkpoints, and bans on the call to prayer for the mosque. In addition, if you look the downtown area of Hebron next to the old city, the Israeli soldiers have confiscated, we talked about before, many shops, and those shops belonging to under the Hebron municipality in the old city. The construction of a dozen of illegal settlement units have been ushered in, and the reconfiguration of water pipes by connecting them to Israeli Waters Company network is exasperating an already massive apartheid system. Now, a Jewish settler in 1994 entered the Ibrahim Mosque and killed 29 Palestinians. After that, Israeli authorities divided the site, the mosque, into a Jewish and Muslim prayer areas, and far-right Israeli settlers continued to strengthen their control over the areas of Hebron. Now, the Hebron settlers today can move freely through the old city, through Hebron, but the Palestinians cannot move freely through the areas and are subject to curfews. Some of them, and I visited a Palestinian family, are not even allowed. They don't even leave their homes because they're afraid that the settlers will occupy their homes and not allow the Palestinians back into their homes. And I visited again a family that under this restriction there was a young man who did never left his apartment, yet he was young, he could work, couldn't bring in income because he could not leave his apartment, subject to the confiscation by Israeli settlers. The present situation then in Hebron really compromises the Hebron Protocol, which is part of the Oslo Accords, by closing almost all the entrances to the mosque except for one entrance. Now, the director of the Hebron Rehabilitation Committee, his name is Mohammed Jabari, said that the ultimate goal then is to establish a Jewish quarter linking settlements to the Ibrahim Mosque by emptying Palestinian neighborhoods. What does this mean? It will screen, this whole procedure will screen Palestinians away from the mosque. Well, they have no access to the mosque anymore. This now ushers in, Mike, a new division, or a new division, or even a harsher reality than this temporal and spatial division imposed since the 1994 massacre that I talked about. It manifests a clear intention to increase Israeli control over the Hebron's old city. Now, Israel has tried to strengthen its power, attain complete control over Hebron and other cities in the West Bank, and the latest government policies continue that policy, which is exasperated since October 2023. Now, Palestine believes using Hebron divisions is a model for the West Bank, and we'll get to Bethlehem. Um, what's happening in Bethlehem? Palestinians in Bethlehem are getting a taste of what's happening in Hebron. One of the Israeli cabinet decision that we talked about last Sunday stipulated that the Bilal bin Rabah Mosque in Bethlehem, known to Jews as the Rachel's Tomb, will be placed under Israeli administrative uh, uh, power for clearing and maintenance after previously being under the jurisdiction of the Bethlehem Municipality Palestinian
Mm.
administration. Now, in conclusion, Mike, Smoltrick has been saying, along with Netanyahu, we will continue to kill the idea of a Palestinian state. Netanyahu has repeated this. They're both working to undermine Oslo Accords and any type of a two-state solution. Uh, these are frothing at the mouth, racist, rabid beasts in power, like the German Nazis in World War II. These are killers, but they're getting away with this. Several Western governments, including France and United Kingdom, have recognized, right, Mike? We talked about this before, the Palestinian state, but they're doing nothing specifically to pressure Israel to stop the atrocities being committed. Uh, the argument is condemning Israel is no longer sufficient. It's time for sanctions. The European Union now has to consider suspending trade agreements completely, as well as individual countries. Israel is imposing a reality of greater Israel and apartheid before our eyes, and again getting away with it. In Bethlehem and Hebron and the rest of the West Bank, Palestinians feel powerless to stop what they view as a creeping annexation. Palestinians fear this is a prelude to total annexation, and the official annexation seems imminent. Imminent. Two-state solution is out. There's no consideration for Palestinian self-determination, and in final conclusion, the future of Palestine, especially for children, is compromised. Peace process? Let's ask ourselves, what peace?
This this creep. Actually, I'm going to say this creep. We could be referring to a whole bunch of people, but I mean the creep of the Palestinian land. It's not in any way is it part of the or is it the big beautiful Trump peace deal, the peace board? It would seem that Israel is acting. It's just going to go ahead and do what it wants to do, and all the others can talk amongst themselves and do what they like. At the end of the day, Israel, in their mind, are going to do what they want to do, as you've demonstrated there. How do we write things?
Yeah, Mike, we really, as we've been referring to a lot, in past interviews and with the public and so forth, is specific pressure. Now, not just words, needs to be exerted against this Israeli systematic apartheid state that's asphyxiating the Palestinians more and more. And now the board, as you talked about, this so-called Board of Peace, is not just about Gaza. Of course, it will, it's going to spread over and probably administer what's happening in the West Bank. So specific policies to pressure Israel. In other words, how can France, in one corner of the mouth, Macron say, "Oh, we recognize the state of Palestine. We see the people are suffering," and then on the other side of his mouth, ordering more arms to be sent to Israel to enable Israeli control of Gaza and the West Bank, and enabling the genocide, obviously, in Gaza, and the further apartheid control by Israel over the West Bank and Gaza. Specific measures against to pressure Israel to stop this. Trump even opposed a great deal this idea of annexation, is saying nothing. I don't think he said anything about these recent measures adopted by the Israeli Knesset that clearly ushers in nonstop and transparent total annexation of the West Bank.
Can Donald Trump do more now? Can he? I don't know if Donald's that interested. Seems to have a very short attention span. There's so many places he has to save, as we know that he wants to win that Peace Prize. Another one. It could be another one. He'll steal someone's if he has to. But what he, and I'm being a bit scurrilous here, Frank, so I apologise, but it is Friday and I've had a great day so far. Tell me, because we need to write things at the moment. There is no spirit of the agreement at all, as you would say as a lawyer. There is none at all from Israel. But you also mentioned that there needs to be more done instead of just said. And if you look at Australia, for example, they were very much behind what you were saying, and we have to look after the Palestinians, all that stuff. They've done an about turn in Australia. If you look at other countries in the world, they're doing about turns. And obviously it's a pressure from Netanyahu and the Israeli government. How do you get them to go back to where they were? Because they are not all, but a great number of them are doing about turns, or worse still, ignoring what's happening, just not caring about what's happening, and moving on to their next task, which who knows what that will be. So how do we get these countries then to go, okay, we need to exert more pressure, and words, people will say it's very true. Words are cheap. They're doing nothing at the moment. So how do we get some sort of semblance of decency about all this?
Yeah, very, very good question, Mike. And what appears to me is, and if we keep this theoretical, that this is just Israel and this is just Gaza, the West Bank has nothing to do with us, people normally that don't identify with the struggle, saying it has nothing to do with me, then have no empathy. Now, I think we need to change the scales here. We need to bring the cows home. We need to bring home the bacon. And how do we do that? Make it relevant to Australians, to Europeans. I live in Europe, and to Americans. Now, how do you make it relevant? Well, first of all, let's get back to, you alluded to this, the legal ramification. Repeated UN resolutions have declared that the Israeli occupation is illegal. 2024, the International Court of Justice, for example, ruled that the Israeli settlements in the West Bank and East Jerusalem and the regime is associated with them are in violation of international law. What we need to do, Mike, one aspect of what we need to do is to say, look, someday this could mean you. In other words, if there is an entity like the Board of Peace taking over the world, ignoring completely international law, attempting to replace the UN in every way, let us say, there is a country such as Russia, such as China, or such as the United States that want to take part of your land, that's violating international law, just like Israel's violating international law by the occupation of the West Bank, East Jerusalem, and Gaza. Then since you have completely allowed ignoring international law with respect to Israel and Gaza, what about complying with international law with respect to what could happen to you? In other words, we need to see that if international law is being ignored, and international institutions as well, being taken over almost by this this phony dictator, like he's playing with the world, like in that Charlie Chaplin movie, the Great Dictator. This is a serious thing, even though it's a comical type of approach to Hitler. That bringing home the bacon means to Australia or other countries, another country, another region can intrude into their land and take it. And since Australians, Americans, and Europeans have allowed international law to be violated, and with respect to Israel and Palestine, then international law at that point will not be applied to them, because it would be hypocritical by saying, look, you do not apply international law to Israel and Palestine, but you need to apply it to us. So we need to see it's what's happening in Gaza and the West Bank, and this is the real big conclusion here, is about all of us. And we need to see this as the destruction of our international institution and international balance that can bring in violence, conflict, and war, because there's now only Trump's group now that will be monitoring all this. And you know, Trump is a warmonger. Now this can be very dangerous for the world balance. We need to see this is that what's happening in Israel and Palestine is all about us, and we need to bring home the bacon, Mike, and see that we need to get back to our international institutions and international law. And by doing that, we need to continue pressuring the International Court of Justice to render its decision, which is still pending, with respect to the genocide committed by Israel, and the International Court, the Criminal Court, where I'm involved as representing Palestinians, needs to make that final decision and condemning Israel for war crimes, and not just issuing arrest warrants against Netanyahu and Gallant and others that are not being complied with.
Yeah, I agree. Look, we have run out of time. We need to, and we'll do this every week if you don't mind. We're going to start doing a lot more on the Middle East, because I think not enough is being done. We have that opportunity. We have a chance. We're fingers crossed that we do have an investor. So we will see what happens in the next few weeks. And hopefully we'll be back 24/7 all over again, under a different name, of course. So we need to really step up a bit here, I think, Frank. And I have you down here as being in Paris, but I think you're in Jordan at the moment, if I'm allowed to say that. I've always been fascinated with Jordan, and I've just, I think I love the Middle East. I think there's some the history and it just blows my mind out. And just reading about Jordan, what a great country that is.
Yes, I mean, I'm surrounded by Roman ruins, to give you an idea of history. And what is interesting is I've avoided coming to Jordan and spent more time in Lebanon, and it was all the issues there and the instability, and then came to Jordan after being in jail by Israel after we got close there with the Samud, the global Samud flotilla. Came to Jordan to improve my Arabic before heading back to Barcelona and be participating in the Samud 2 movement. And now I'm in Jordan, and I see, yes, there's collaboration between the Jordanian government and Israel, but there's a place where a lot of Palestinians have come, are out of war. It's a very balanced area. There's very little crime here. And people, the economy is not so good, but people seem to be in positive spirits here. It's a very positive area, very historical. And for that, and seeing a lot of Palestinians around where I can go, and meet and work with Palestinians, because I'm not allowed to go back in Palestine. I've been banned from Palestine and Israel, and Lebanon is clearly unstable. I find it's great to be here, really, and it's an amazing cultural place.
Now we got a message from the IDF. They said they've got your cell waiting for you. Just come on back. Come on. Look, Frank, we love you, Frank. Thank you so much for your help and your work. If somebody wants to find out more about Dr. Frank Romano, the greatest lawyer in the world, how's that?
But just Frank Romano, 11 Terror 5. Go into my website and just put Frank Romano and maybe Palestine or that Bedouin village Al Kana Akmar, and be glad to through the book and other ways of speaking with you and sharing with you and spectators of this program, Mike, and we'll keep this going.
Fantastic. Thank you so much for your time. Dr. Frank Romano, or just Frank, thank you so much. This is not the protagonist. This is the world today. It's been one of those days. Let me tell you, the wife has got a scotch for me when I get home. I've heard it.
Our mission at Pets of the Homeless is really simple, and that's to keep vulnerable people and their pets together when they're going through a tough time. Back in 2015, Pets of the Homeless started with a 20-kilo bag of dog food, made it into small packs, put it in a suitcase, and it was just me walking down the streets of Melbourne, one woman on a mission to make a difference. I would share the story on social media.
We've just hit 100,000 meals distributed today.
And the community really responded positively, and it just grew from there.
My name is Kent, and this is Hippo. She's everything to me. She's such a good girl. I got her at a time when I wasn't very stable. I'd come out of prison, I was homeless, but as soon as I got her, I just realised, oh my God, I can't let this dog go. And she's just my best friend. Hippo had a canine equivalent of an ACL injury. I knew there was something really desperately wrong. It was agonising seeing her suffering. My caseworker put me in touch with Pets of the Homeless, and Yvonne said that they could help, and I was just so overjoyed. I wouldn't have been able to get through that medical incident without their help. Like, it just would have been impossible.
That bond between us and our pet is very important, and when someone is going through a really tough time in their life, that bond becomes even more important, and that's what we're trying to protect at Pets of the Homeless.
Who's that?
My favourite quote is, "I always wondered why somebody doesn't do something about that. Then I realised I was somebody." My intention wasn't to actually start a charity, it was to help. It was just putting one foot in front of another, and that's how we got to where we are today. We're now in a warehouse. We have about 150 volunteers. We provide on average about 60 to 70,000 meals every single month. We have a network of about 73 community partner organisations that we work with. We've also taken in hundreds of pets into our foster care program, and we've just reached 2.5 million meals distributed.
In the time that I've been volunteering with Pets of the Homeless, I've seen the community grow, numbers of volunteers, pet food packing, got a brand new van, and we can reach more community pantries and reach more people. The community, whether it's the volunteers who are packing the food, who are foster caring, they've got so much love to give.
I think Pets of the Homeless gives people hope. There can be a bit of judgment for people who are homeless and have a dog, but the reality is those dogs have got love and support, and it's so wonderful that Pets of the Homeless are able to help. It really makes a big difference in actual lives. It's really important work.
To the people who have supported Pets of the Homeless over the last 10 years, thank you from the bottom of my heart. There's so many kind people out there, and I'm just grateful for all of them. The work that we need to do is so huge, and the need is growing, and we can't do it without the support of our community.
We're today's news talk, the world today.
I was just telling everybody how I was looking forward to a scotch when I was getting home. I believe the wife drank the entire bottle. No. Just joking about that. Friday, I can say those things. Richard, it's a bit early for Richard to have a scotch at this time of the day because he's in the UK, which is about 20 minutes away from 9. But you have something to look forward to. My next guest, Richard Anthony Edward North, or Richard North, is a British author, political researcher, and blogger. Now, he's published books on defence and agriculture and was previously the research director in the European Parliament for the former political grouping Europe of Democracies and Diversities, which included the UK Independence Party, UKIP. Now, North has collaborated with the late journalist Christopher Booker on climate change, public health and other issues. He co-wrote a number of books with Christopher Booker during including The Great Deception. Now, I made light before of a scotch, but you actually need it if you could understand what's happening with Rupert Lowe's harrowing, absolutely illuminating rape gang hearings ringing in our ears. The UK government and most of the media, including a lot of independent media, are determined to ignore this national tragedy. It's a crime, it's revulsion on steroids. It's I cannot believe that they are still trying to bury this. I'm going to talk to Richard about how such gangs, how they escape the law. Richard, thanks for joining me.
Hello, Mike. Welcome to the snowy Bradford, on the fringe of the caliphate.
Yeah, but I've had the air conditioner on and it's been freezing in here because I want to feel what you're feeling at the moment.
Well, we're in the throes of this enormous furore about Jim Ratcliffe, who committed the sin of sins of saying that we're being colonised by immigrants. I have to recall that I'm London born and bred, but I've lived in Bradford for the best part of 40 years. The last time I went to a particular supermarket about 2 miles away from my home, I was the only white man in the shop, and I was being trailed by a group of black-clad ladies in burqas, speaking what was probably Urdu, could have been something else, but it certainly wasn't English. The idea that we are not being colonised seems to be unique to the political set in London. They need to come trotting up to Bradford and see what life is really like.
I'm just wondering now if, after saying that, you might hear on the door,
my son got a visit. My son got a visit at about 9 o'clock in the evening by two, as we call them, plods in this country, police gentlemen who arrested him, locked him in a cage, and took him off about 20 miles and interrogated him through to midnight for posting a meme which said nasty things about Islam. That is the state of Britain today. Yes, you're quite right. The knock is something we all fear. It's something that is quite possible, and it's something I'm well prepared for.
Tell me about the Kashmiri rape gangs.
Well, the one issue that struck me that has been omitted from the public discourse is that, and we've heard a great deal from detractors who try to say, well, white people rape women as well, blah, 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 blah. What distinguishes the Kashmiri, and it is that when you talk about Pakistanis, by far the majority of these are Kashmiri. And what distinguishes the child sexual exploitation by these groups is that they're actually treating it as a business. These children are effectively sex slaves, and they are being groomed, that's the word that's used, for selling out or treating as gifts to associates within particular groups on a very structured, fee-paying or gift basis as a business enterprise. And what we're looking at is not just random groups of rapists, but structured, organized groups which are effectively criminal syndicates, not unlike, in fact, extraordinarily similar to the Italian mafiosa who took such a strong part in United States history. And this is not being recognized. We are dealing with organized crime syndicates. The rape is simply one part of a broader enterprise which covers everything or anything from money laundering to tobacco smuggling to retail illicit tobacco to illicit drug dealing, particularly heroin. The kings of the heroin trade in Britain are the Kashmiris. They're close links to the Pashtun in Afghanistan, and time again we see them up in court with heroin seizures. They are involved in fencing for shoplifters. You hear in the UK we've had an explosion of shoplifting. You hear organised gangs doing it, but you find that the fences are very often South Asian. The people who are buying the goods from the shoplifters are South Asian, Indian sometimes Pakistani. And the government is not getting to grips with this. It's not even recognising that we're in a grip of organised crime, of which, as I say, the rape is just one part of it.
Tell me about the law enforcement. Some call them coppers.
We call them plod.
You were so disrespectful. But law enforcement, is that an apparition?
Partly. I mean, when this started, the rape gangs are not new. There's records in local newspapers going back to the early 60s. The big push of Pakistani immigration, Kashmiri immigration, came late 50s, early 60s. And even then, there were reports of organized rape from the Kashmiri community. Now, I have a tiny sliver of sympathy with the police in the very, very early days. And you can get terribly po-faced about this. But the fact is that child prostitution in the working class in Britain has always been a thing. I mean, the Salvation Army was basically set up to rescue fallen women. And the police initially thought they were dealing with child prostitution. So they dismissed the cases of what we now know as organized rape, but they allowed the phenomenon to continue unchecked. And gradually they got absorbed into it, and they got into it too deep and couldn't change or wouldn't change track. And of course, we then are dealing with an element of corruption. We know now that the police themselves were actually, some of the policemen were actually raping the kids themselves. Other police, Asian police, were actually part of the gangs and were feeding information back into the gangs from the police, so that the police, and particularly with the local authorities themselves, became corrupted and as a result became part of the problem rather than actually dealing with the enforcement and dealing with the cures.
Just wondering, what's gone? I mean, if you look at the tiers of your society, and we have government, the elite, and then you have law enforcement doing what government wants. If you look at Mandelson, former Prince Andrew, look at a whole bunch of others, the names will be coming out soon. Look at your government, the Starmer government, and I'll keep off a lot of the political issues, but the lack of respect issues are quite prominent. What's gone wrong with the society of the UK? Has their moral compass gone? Because this is appalling. When we are talking about each of those issues, by the way, we're talking about the rape of children, and but it's not one little, a little bit happened there. It's like this. It's pelting down instead of rain, with child crimes, pedophilia. It's just pouring down at the moment, and government and law enforcement. When I said, "Is it an apparition?" I was actually quite serious about it, because the idea of a copper is to catch the bad people, and they ain't doing that. They're enjoying the fruits of the bad people's labour. So, what's wrong with the British, or what's wrong with the governments and the constabulary and the people that make the UK tick? What's wrong with the people of the UK getting up? We see them marching about this, marching about that. What about marching about the most defenceless group of people, the children in your country? I don't see that a whole lot.
I have my own personal theories. I don't think we ever got over as a nation being a feudal society. The classic British comment is, well, mustn't complain, must we? We are, generally speaking, overly compliant, placid, easily led, and slow to anger. And we have allowed ourselves to be, as a people, we've allowed ourselves to be abused by a political class which has gradually distanced itself from any idea of democracy and representation of the people, and has become an incubus based in London, which has completely lost touch with society and is now ruling us by diktat and has completely lost the plot. London has become a nation on its own. It does not represent the rest of the country. The people in Parliament no longer represent the rest of the nation. They sit there and dictate to us in profound ignorance. And this is the fascinating thing. The imagination, one thinks of our ruling classes, if you call it that, at the top of an information tree, who are all-knowing and are completely knowledgeable, understanding the issues. But in fact, what you find is there's an inverted information tree. These people are driven in the main by profound ignorance. It is a struggle to understand quite how ignorant the average MP is. And by God, I've researched and worked with enough of them. And you find that they are locked into their mindset, their little doctrines, and they are completely closed to outside influences, so that they develop this extraordinary insouciance, this insulated phenomenon, which no longer bears any resemblance to what anybody else in the country thinks. So we complain, we write blogs, we write posts on X. The storm on X at the moment about Jim Radcliffe, I mean, it's very clear that the bulk of the population has absolutely no time for Starmer. He's one of the most hated prime ministers that we've had in living memory, and probably beyond that. The whole concept of mass immigration is an anathema to the British people. We don't want it. We've never wanted it. We've never asked for it. Every time we've voted for it, we've voted against it, and still they do it. We've had more people in the last 20 years imposed on us than have immigrated to the whole country since 1066, between 1066 and 1997. We're in a situation now where we have more people, something like 12 million people in the last decade imposed on us, and it's not acceptable. But the government and its claque are completely and utterly ignoring us.
Yeah, I totally agree. Even from Rupert Lowe's inquiry, one child was raped 700 plus times.
It's appalling.
The country should stop, and it would have once. It's just, oh, well, that's a terrible story if someone reads it. Legacy media covers it up. So does a lot of independent media, or they try and milk it. This is if it's accepted, if no one's doing anything about this, it shows you that Western civilization in your part of the world is in real trouble.
Well, there you have the BBC spending more time on the Epstein victims than what is probably 250,000 British girls raped by Pakistanis. Media are very, very much part of the problem. And I think essentially they are London-based. If you look at the BBC, its chairman is an Indian-born who has appointed an HR director who is in fact a Pakistani national who's naturalized. The top of the BBC is utterly compromised. They have gone into diversity big time. Every other reporter these days seems to be an ethnic character. And they have basically sold out the nation to the great God of diversity and will not say anything realistic about the way this country is deteriorated under the groaning under the weight of immigration, which is there for everybody to see but these myopic fools who think they know better than us.
Will it ever right itself? I mean, under Starmer, and it's all part of civilization to poke at the government or the administration, the current administration. But this is way worse. This is way worse. We have the disintegration of your culture, and you still got another 3 odd years to go. And it still doesn't mean that Labor will be replaced, because you've got to have a very good opposition, and there's still a long way to go before Nigel gets to the end of that walking path. So, are you going to get out of it? Will the UK regain its culture?
There's an academic called David Betts from King's College. You may have heard him. I don't know if you've actually interviewed him. But he has been talking very credibly about the UK drifting into civil war. Now, you can define a civil war in many, many ways, but I wholeheartedly agree with his premise. And I think we are sliding slowly, inexorably into a situation where there is no longer a way of voting ourselves out of this mess. And I think Betts thinks within 5 years. I think possibly a little bit longer. But slowly we are seeing the way things are breaking down. The social contract is effectively wrecked. Nobody trusts government. Every part of government seems to be breaking down. Cooperation, social cohesion is breaking down. And anybody with any brains looking forward can only agree with that. I don't think there is an easy way out of this. I think we are marching into a very, very bloody, miserable future.
I do too. But you're not alone. And it probably deserves a longer discussion next time. The invitation is open to you. I have enjoyed this immensely, and we've just touched the top of it too, haven't we? We haven't even just skimmed the top of it. So I think we need to discuss more. And tell me about your website and what we can expect on that.
Turbulent times. So we ran a website, the EU referendum, which went for nearly 20 years. I'm now in my 21st year of blogging. I now run a site called Turbulent Times. It's turbulenttimes.co.uk. I like to boast, and it is a very vain boast on my part, that I have I have blogged every day, 24/7 for 21 years. I took 2 days off for open heart surgery, and I took a day off for going to prison. But apart from that, I have an unbroken record. The prison, incidentally, I refused to pay my council tax because I'd had 8 burglaries in my house, and I refused to pay the police precept. Whereupon, for the first time in history, we got 12 policemen in my road to arrest me at midnight and take me off to jail. So this is Britain for you.
Well, you're a villain. I mean, that's fantastic, by the way. I love villains, but you're a good guy, and your work is very good. So the invitation is there. So we should do more of this. And when I'm next in the UK, we should get a bottle of whiskey and just discuss the world.
Yeah, for sure. No single malt.
Anything. Richard, thank you so much for your time too. Richard North there. This has been the World Today. The protagonist has been a real Friday, but we got through it. Have a great weekend. As they used to say on the Two Ronnies, may your God go with you. Thank you so much. Have a good one.